yeah, just that these habits are helping me to be more intentional in my parenting. And yeah, I guess for me, it's not enough to just say that I want to be a more patient parent or I want to pray more with or for my kids. But these kind of practices and habits help me do that. And I'd say the last thing that I'll share with this is the one phrase that he repeats over and over in the book is that habits don't change God's love for us, but God's love for us can and should change our habits. So I hope that's been encouraging for you.
That's lovely. Thank you. Thank you. I've been curious about that book as I saw it at the national conference, and so I'm glad you've done the heavy lifting for us and shared. Now, I'd encourage it. You know, it's helpful to just have some language around practice, around training, around trying. And this ties right into the pillars of our church, God in our daily lives, intentional relationships. And there's one that we're sort of slipping in there now as we've kind of modified these 4 pillars a little bit. Rhythms and practices is standing on its own as kind of one of the legs, and then empowerment of the Holy Spirit. So in the past we had spiritual formation there, but now we're recognizing that spiritual formation is the whole thing, is everything in our lives that forms us. It's the whole process by which we become like Christ. And so we felt like naming that we think a part of our formation is rhythms and practices that put us in a place to understand and receive God's love and to align ourselves would be good. We've been paying attention for 8 weeks in this series, a Contemplative Foundation, and it's a practice-based series. So there's practices from the book, and we've been suggesting practices, and some of you have engaged with them, and I love hearing stories where that go like, well, I tried silence once. I love that. It's so important for us to be playful about the invitations of God. It's so important for us to have a positive association to his invitations, as opposed to me or the church or yourself telling you, I should be doing these things. And so last week we were talking about silence and stillness, and we kind of were looking to see if we could ramp it up a little bit. I was curious, did anyone get 2 minutes of silence this past week? It's you boys. 2 minutes? 5 minutes? Probably 5 minutes. Awesome. 10 minutes? Oh, we're still working towards 10 minutes. That's good. Oh yeah, Joe's holding on to this practice. It's bringing life. Well, we don't have to stop at the end of this week. If this is something that's been like intriguing to you, you've sort of tasted a little bit, you can work it into your practice, and maybe you hang on 2 minutes for 2 months. And that's like kind of where your threshold is. What a lovely thing that would be. Last week we had this analogy that I brought up, kind of the mountain and of the weather. Remember that? And that during silence we become quickly aware that there are changing weather patterns. There are like clouds passing along in our minds. And it can be distracting. But that it can be also helpful to know that we are not the weather. We focus on the solid presence of God and his love for us in the moment. And today we're going to get some more mileage, a little bit more mileage out of this symbol. That it's normal for the weather to change, not just as we sit down to try to be silent and still, but in the whole ecosystem of our lives. We have periods in our lives of sadness and grief, joy, fullness, satisfaction, and There are lovely days where our lives make sense and where God keeps near. And there are dreary days where everything seems to be against us, even our own inner thoughts. But friends, I'm here to tell you to take heart that the weather, those changes, is not you. It's good to pay attention to the weather. If you're up on the mountain, if you're going to go up on the mountain, it's good to think about and plan for the weather. But you are the mountain. Your identity is fixed. God loves you with a deep and everlasting love. And the more we pay attention to the weather, the more we can learn to prepare for it, to harness it even, to help us understand God. We can learn to not let the changes knock us too far off the trail. So we're paying attention, we're watching, we're staying prepared. And from there comes my main idea today, which is that we can make ourselves ready to experience the coming of God, the presence of God, through watching our interior movements. And this is picking up on a theme that we first started talking about in the second week of this series, that there's something about noticing what's happening inside of us that helps us learn to experience God and to notice when He comes. So, our gospel reading today is from Matthew chapter 5. Let's stand up for the reading of the gospel. Chapter 25, verse 1. At that time, the kingdom of heaven will be like 10 virgins who took their lamps and went out to meet the bridegroom. 5 of them were foolish, and 5 were wise. The foolish ones took their lamps, but did not take any oil with them. The wise ones, however, took oil in jars along with their lamps. The bridegroom was a long time in coming, and they all became drowsy and fell asleep. At midnight, the cry rang out, "Here's the bridegroom, come out to meet him." Then all the virgins woke up and trimmed their lamps. The foolish ones said to the wise, "Give us some of your oil, our lamps are going out." "No," they replied, "there may not be enough for both us and you. Instead, go to those who sell oil and buy some for yourselves." But while they were on their way to buy the oil, the bridegroom arrived. The virgins who were ready went in with him to the wedding banquet, and the door was shut. Later, the others also came. "Lord, Lord," they said, "open the door for us." But he replied, "Truly, I tell you, I don't know you. Therefore, keep watch, because you do not know the day or the hour." The word of the Lord. You can be seated. Many of you, right now, and for weeks already maybe, have been preparing to host guests for the holidays. Have you started your text threads? Right? There are schedules to work out and to coordinate. There are deep breaths to take. There are rooms to book. You have to plan for the gluten-free and the dairy-free and the sugar-free and the paleo. They all meet together at one table. It's ridiculous. There are houses to clean. There are all kinds of preparations to be made. And preparation is on Jesus' mind. Always, he says, we're to be preparing for his coming. In this age, right now, and in the age to come. Here's one of those parables where Jesus, yet again, he's trying to help people embrace this idea that we can cooperate with God in our waiting. We can cooperate with God as we wait. It is an active thing that we're doing. Waiting and watching is foundational to following Jesus. And kind of in the grand scheme of things, we live in a time of waiting. Last week, we explored this idea of statio, just a prayerful pause between activities. Well, if you blow that way up, we're also in a pause between the first coming of Jesus and the second. We're in a constant time of waiting, and soon we restart our church year with a period of waiting, watching, known as Advent. That's coming up in a few weeks, the first Sunday of December, where those words, watching, waiting, preparation, hope for the future, those are the main themes. And we live now in a time where we're always doing that because we don't have fulfillment. People that are still sick, God still needs to visit people and communicate his healing love to them. We're always hoping for more. This is a hard passage, though. His implication here is, at least in part, if you're not doing this, if you're not ready, perhaps you're not my disciple. Perhaps you're not included in this. It's another one of those times where Jesus, whether it's him saying it or it's a character in one of his stories saying it, is, I never knew you. You and I we were never a thing. And it's sobering. And when we read this whole chapter, we get some more doses of this. He's there separating sheep from goats. He's separating and talking about people who receive resources and money and use it in a way that honors him, and then people that don't. And again, the implication is there's some punishment coming. That's not what I wanted. I wanted you to invest. So he's kind of hitting from all these different angles. There's people who have showed hospitality, right? And people who haven't. People who have visited people in prison, and those who haven't. He's sort of creating this ad hoc list of hey, there's a way in which you can be preparing in this time of waiting. And so we receive it strongly as well. Anytime there's a hard teaching in the Bible that seems to be calling us to a real decisive, real firm decision, and where we kind of wonder, you're kind of going overboard there, Lord. I thought everybody got in on this. We don't have to arrive at a theological conclusion that covers all of our bases in order to read it and think, I need to be ready. I want to have oil in my lamp. How can I be ready? How can I have oil in my lamp? I encourage a reading of the Bible this way. And in the same way, when you read another passage that says there's absolutely nothing that could shut the door, right? The heavenly city is going to come down with open gates facing north, south, east, and west, and we can also take those passages and help it stir in us this idea that God's love is invitational for the whole world. So we hear him on these two levels. He's talking to those that are truly his disciples. He's saying, I want you to invest treasure for my purposes. I beware of becoming too attached to money. I want you to use your influence to partner with me in loving the world. And there's this sense that if you don't, you might be out of oil. The door might be shut. You might miss it. Looking at the details of the scene, we have a wedding. He's using a common scene to make a point. And the bridegroom first goes to the bride's house, and he's going to pick up the bride in some way, and then they're going to make their way back to the groom's house, and then they're going to have the ceremony and the party and everything. And so, culturally speaking, this is a reference to that waiting period where everyone is waiting. And we have a similar type of thing at weddings, you know. I'm thinking I've got sparkler and I'm waiting for the bride and the groom to come down out of the reception, or I've got bubbles or something. And they're waiting. And there appears to be an abnormally long time of waiting. And one of the things that seems to happen here is that people light lamps. And with joy and expectation, they're awaiting a kind of culmination. Everyone has lamps, but only some have oil. Only some are prepared. An important question for us is, what is the oil? Well, oil is often a symbol of the Spirit of God, and I think that fits here. And we can ask ourselves, what does it look like to fill my lamp with oil? What does it look like for me to be filled with the Holy Spirit? Where are places where I am filled? How does that happen for me? And I would ask you, what practices have you found help you stay filled with God's presence and identity, to stay awake, to stay aware of His love? So many times I've spoken with people, some of you here in this room, that say, there's just something different about my day when I do X. When I, in some way, spend time with God, when I read the Bible in the morning, when I have a time of silence there with my coffee, when I sit out on the back porch, if I have time to go for a walk, or if we say our prayer together. There is such a difference that a consistent practice of being with God can make. Without it, we flame out like a wick that's lit and has no oil. And so we're exploring some of these practices in this series, and I think here God is very much saying, be ready. And there are lots of ways to be ready. And that's one reason why in Luke, where there's a parallel kind of whole section that's very similar, and here in Matthew, he kind of is just saying, listen, like money, what you do with your time, your resources, like all of this is part of the getting ready. But I want to press in particular on what is filling to you. I like this image of oil in a lamp. Luke chapter 12, the author writes, be dressed, ready for service, and keep your lamps burning, like servants eagerly waiting for their master to return from a wedding banquet, so that when he comes and knocks, they can immediately open the door for him. It will be good for those servants whose master finds them watching when he comes. And so I'm talking about a certain kind of watching. Watching our interior movements, which is where God often is showing up. And so this is the skill we're going to suggest this week. So in week 2, we were talking about, hey, there's certain things in your day I want you to notice, like, is this an energizing thing? Is this something where you feel kind of in the zone? Or is this something that's like draining? It was sort of a basic evaluation of like, all right, you put this in the positive ledger, you put this in the life-sucking ledger. And now we're just getting a little more specific as we think about what's happening. We're working on just naming 2 types of movements for the purpose of keeping close to God, for the purpose of noticing what's happening here so that we can see, so that we can have a lit lamp and notice when God is making an appearance to us in one way or another, when He's saying something to us through our daily lives. These could be moments that are very short. These could be brief encounters with some kind of beauty, like you're talking to your children about. These could be seasons where one of the other movements lingers. And I want to say that these are normal in following Jesus. These shifts, where you feel one season full of faith and hope and love, and then in another full of doubt and little faith, these are very normal in our lives. And so if you find yourself in either one of these seasons, you can just think, okay, I'm on pace. This is normal for me. So if you're feeling like, I don't know, I'm feeling this doubt, well done. You are experiencing the spiritual life as it should be experienced. But there's some things we can do inside of these seasons to help us connect with God. And the first type of movement we're calling, and the contemplative tradition calls consolation. And sometimes we try to swap in other words. I find it difficult. Like I have to use a bunch of words instead of just this one word. Essentially, it's a consoling experience. It's when you're feeling joy or full of faith or a nearness of God's presence. A sense that you're being pulled towards God, pulled towards something that's true about Him. Somehow caught up in His tractor beam, if that's a better image, right? Your goal is to just put up the sail when you're in that type of moment. Like you're not fighting it. You don't put the thrusters in reverse. You just let yourself be pulled along by whatever experience it is that's consoling you. And these can be little moments, like I said, or big moments. And I could share a couple of examples. A little moment first. I came home from a meeting a few weeks ago, a little down, tired, just lacking in general in hope. And I was disappointed in myself, which I think was the deeper feeling. And I came in the house, and I heard music. When I had left the house, it wasn't, there was a bit of dinner disappointment chaos happening. It wasn't a happy home at that moment. But when I came back home, there was music and singing and laughter. And Simone had the ukulele out and was playing with Seth. What were the chords? And Ezra, working on F? Yes. And they were singing some silly song. And they were asking Ezra questions, because Ezra is who you ask when you're trying to figure out chords on the ukulele. You know, just the one-finger ones. One or two little fingers on those little strings. And Nora was there with her violin. Of course, proud of the fact that she knows more than Mommy about these things. And so she's playing along too. Simple, silly songs. And it was a lovely moment. But it was more than that. Something about it just shifted in me. It shifted something in me. And it filled me with that trifecta of things we're always looking for. Faith, hope, and love. A sense of satisfaction in an idea that like, oh, I like this. I could live like this. I could do life if it could be like this. That is a consolation. Another more powerful example came to me recently while I was writing for an assignment, something called my vocational narrative. It's a story about yourself and how you have felt God's rising call on your life. Like how has that showed up in your life, and what would you name it now? And so I'm thinking about me as a young child. I'm thinking about pictures of myself as a kid, the family I grew up in, things I've enjoyed, and I'm putting together uh, I'm thinking about me as a little boy alone in the woods and how much I enjoyed it. I'm thinking about me as a teenager, exploring my sense of self, moving into being a father and a pastor, and just a sense of God's guidance and purposefulness came over me. And I started crying. And it was a consolation type experience. A sense that, again, oh, I guess you know what you're doing. I guess I can trust you. Something in that moment was like my life was making a little bit more sense. And I was filled with hope. And that was a consoling experience. It made me want to double down on my commitment to God, my sense of investment in this project that He's about. Well, when you feel the opposite of those types of experiences, that's what we call desolation. And for those who like to read, this always reminds me of the desolation of smog. Right? Who's with me? Yes. The dragon, the desolation. It's a pretty negative picture. Smog in Lake Town, destroying it. The Hobbit. That's what we're talking about here. And this is any experience that if consolation is some sort of like flash of awareness of God's presence or His love or beauty, desolation is when all of that is like behind a veil. When I'm just being pulled away. The life is being sucked out of me. There's not life coming into me based on what I'm seeing or hearing or feeling. I'm moving away. And I see this in my life too. Regularly, I experience this sense of feeling rejected by friends, of feeling unsupported in my work, by God mostly, alone, a failure. And it could be occasioned by some real or perceived rejection. It doesn't really matter what kicks it off. When I'm feeling that way, I'm not feeling faith, hope, and love. And again, this is a barometer that I often use. Like, is there any sense of like, am I moving towards that? Or am I moving away from that? And I can't always control it. Again, this is normal. It's normal as human beings to experience these things. And this is desolation, moving away. And so, as you pay attention to what's going on inside, and you look at your day, or you look at your week, or you look at just what's going on right now, it's good to be able to say, wow, like that did not produce life in me. That produced something strongly in me. And it gives me some things I can talk to about the Lord. Because the Lord often, when we're honest with Him about what's causing pain, what's pulling us away, doesn't He often speak kindly to us when we'll actually open that up to Him? Why would we learn to tune into these? Why am I up here telling you this is helpful? Why has this been a part of the Christian tradition since the very beginning? To name these movements. Well, here's the deal. There are things in our life that are trying to lead us towards consolation. There are things in your life that are wanting to lead you towards experiences of the coming of God into your daily life. And there are things that are leading you towards desolation. They want to move you away from God. They're inviting you and enticing you away. As we watch for God's coming, right, this is our main idea. We're watching our interior movements so that we can notice the presence of God. it's good for us to be able to tell which is which of these movements. And it helps us stay in a watchful mode, to keep our lamps filled. And there is, again, common language used for these two directions, things that are pulling us towards God, things that are moving us away from God, especially as it pertains to what's happening in here. And the early writers actually called them spirits. There's the sense that there is a bad or a false spirit, without getting too wrapped up in like whether we're talking about demons or actual or principalities. We're just using that word as a general term, that there's something in me that's like wanting me to move towards desolation. And that there are also things that are pulling me, the good spirit, which we can say is the Holy Spirit, acting in us, pulling us towards consolation. And these movements are present in our life all the time. And like, thinking about Angela and the practices, how clear it is, like as a parent with children, right? Like, I want to wring your neck. Oh my gosh, it's so soft and sweet. Like, you're bouncing between the things that are moving you towards consolation and just making you absolutely crazy. And so it's really good to pay attention to these things, because then we can notice better when the presence of God is coming, when he wants to say something to us. These experiences of being pulled or pushed one way or the other, they show up differently when we're in different modes of life. So there are times in our life, and some of you in this room are in one of those times, where the general trajectory of your life is moving towards God. You are making decisions, you're kind of caught up in this interesting thing about following Jesus, and you're oriented towards God. And it's at these times that the good spirit, movements and activities and ideas and thoughts that are moving you towards God's presence, you can just give in to them. And they appear to you softly. They're not harsh. So some writers say it's like water dropping down into a sponge. And the other analogy we've used is like it's a wind at our back or a wind in our sail. And we're sort of on this general trajectory, and so we're like, sure, a Bible study? Yeah, like I'll meet with you. Like I enjoy praying, and I'm going to worship events, and like I'm organizing my life. You know, I'm just on a trajectory towards God. And so the evil spirit then, the things that want to pull us away, are more like water dropping on a rock. It's like it can show up in our life, and this could be an external event. So a tragedy can come, and then the way we process that tragedy would be like the false spirit telling you, see? You need to turn, and this is not like, it's like you need to wake up and realize that God's not loving. That would be the work of the false spirit, a jolt that entices us to give up on God, to try to weaken the pull of God in our life. And then there are other times when our life is oriented away from God. Like just the general movement of our life, we're moving away from God. We're not putting ourselves in places to fill up our lamps. We're not in community, let's say. We aren't praying. We aren't pushing back against unhealthy habits. There's no one else helping us do that. And in a season like this, the false spirit comforts you. So it wants you to keep doing these things. Again, we're talking about the way these movements show up in your life. So it's here when you're already sort of moving away from God. I don't really need, church is like, I'm just not a thing. Like, prayer is too hard. I'm not going to seek out the type of prayer that suits me. I'm just sort of drop it. These friends, I'm not going to get together with them or let them know what's going on in my life. I'm just moving away from places where God might show up, where I might experience his love. So then the false spirit would be like, see, yeah, I told you. Just keep going. Don't worry. Everybody's doing it. Maybe you're tempted to make some sleazy business deal. Like, hey, think about the money you could make, or all the taxes you could save, or everybody's doing it. You deserve it. This is the false spirit. And how do you think the good spirit shows up? So if we're paying attention, we might notice the good spirit then is like water dropping on a stone, splashing like a violent splash, waking us up. And sometimes that's an internal event. Sometimes it's a friend. How some of you have been the good spirit, like a violent water droplet on stone for somebody else, trying to reverse the trajectory of someone's life. And that is like a wake up. That's the Spirit saying, wake up. It's your conscience saying, wake up. What you're about to do, you don't want to do. You should not do. This isn't good for you. So, this is why we work on watching and noticing these movements, so that we, depending on the season of our life, can either say yes to what's pushing us towards God, or notice the wake-up call from the good spirit, or notice that like, ooh, I have a desire to do this thing. But as I look at this desire, actually this is pulling me away from God. So I'm learning to recognize that even though that felt kind of good, I'm learning to differentiate the feelings. That just because it was going to help me make more money, just because the rest of the world said it was a good decision, that's actually pulling me away. So this is why we pay attention on the inside. And friends, these practices that we're talking about, I really want to be careful that we don't receive them as if it's another app to put on our phone. Like another thing that you're supposed to be doing, or should be doing, or could be doing. What I'm hoping is that we get a new operating system. That we have an operating system of attentiveness, of watching, of putting ourselves in God's presence. So the operating system on a computer or a phone, it's responsible for everything that runs. It makes possible all the things that your devices do, but it's totally behind the scenes. And that's what we're kind of shooting for. Not that you would say, oh man, but I'm doing the journaling and the Bible reading and the Bible in a year, and now I've got to do 2 minutes of silence to start that. And sooner or later, you have heavy burdens. And that can't be right. His burdens are light. He invites us to rest. And so what I'm hoping for is that together, in this community here or in the smaller communities that you're a part of, you can be encouraging one another to pay attention. This kind of noticing is really hard to do only on your own. If you never have anyone that you say, you describe your feelings to, that you describe, I'm feeling rejected. Like how many times we felt rejected by our friends or coworkers. Like it happens all the time. If there's no one in your life that can ever say like, well, tell me more about that, then we need to think about how we can put some people in our life like that, or who we can reach out to. Because these things are meant to do with other people. So if you're in a group with moms, like Angela's been talking about, okay, well, there's a lot of things going on underneath the surface. And I bet to almost any one of their questions you could say, tell me more about that. Like what would you really want? Like what's your hope for what would be happening? So this week, that's our practice. We're intentionally noticing and naming what we might call a consolation, what we might call a desolation. And we're just taking baby steps. It might be as simple as, I'm just thinking about how my day's gone so far, a box of dahlia bulbs in straw on my counter. It could be as simple as that. Thinking about these bulbs being put in the ground by Ezra sometime in the spring, and then watching. Like, that can be a consoling experience. You have a different reality. It could be, putting new racing stripes on your Honda Civic with stickers and little fake shark fin things so that people think your car is a hot rod. And you're feeling it because it's a crafty experience, and you're a crafty person, and that makes you feel in touch with how God has made you, putting little shark fins on your Honda Civic. It can be a small thing. It can be a really seemingly big thing. I met with a man this past week who very sort of pan-faced was describing how God delivered him from debilitating anxiety in a moment. And I was like, wait, can you describe that for me again? Oh yeah, the pain that I had here and all those thoughts in my head, they're gone. And they've been with me since I was a kid. And I don't really even know why. It just happened to me. And I was like, and so I just carried that around with me for a few days, just like, wait, that's possible? And it wasn't anything that he did or me. It just happened. And so let's stand together. Yeah. Can we play a little My Portion? How's that? Would that be good? What do you think? Do you think you could, this week, you got a little journal or a piece of paper, could you just put a big D or a big C? Or write a couple things that have happened and been I'm going to call this a consoling experience. I'm going to call this a desolating experience. Could you sit down with your kids and be like, hey, tell me about something beautiful. Tell me something you enjoyed today. Or tell me where you felt left out today, alone today. All of the deepest, most seemingly spiritual activities that the mystics and the early church fathers and the ancient saints all recommend, friends, they're mostly just childlike activities. They're mostly just us returning to Mia's age and Sam's age and Seth's age. Because they're kind of aware. Hey, that made me feel bad. I'm not feeling brought in. I'm not feeling held. And Jesus tells us, just become like them in the way you approach me. Let me love you. Let me help you notice. And so let's just stand. You can stand or you can sit. And just receive this song, letting it push us into our week and into our intention, into this practice.
Lord, I'm coming back to you. Lord, I'm kneeling down to you. I love you, and I
I bless you to receive the love of the Father, the intimacy of the Son, the filling of the Spirit. Friends, go in peace. May you have peace as Thanksgiving approaches. May you be peace for your friends and your families. Amen.
Leave my side, faithful Father. In you I will abide. You'll never leave my side. You'll never leave my side, faithful Father. In you I will abide. You'll never leave my side. You'll never leave my side, faithful Father. In you I will
So what, were people not able to hear? Or?
They couldn't see the screen.
Did it eventually go back on?
Brennigan said she watched and it wasn't on.
Yes, and so those are two unrelated things. The screens
Right.
aren't working.
But did the screens come back on?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
You guys have music? Good job, Adam.
Likewise, everybody. It was fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was a good set.
Your fan club's here.
Yeah, I know. I feel like a rock star.
Is your mom a rock star? I feel like a lot of times we play songs better at the end of the set.
I know, but like the past couple times I've been playing, we haven't been coming up, you know. So it's like Ben's like my portion, like, yeah, I'll be up there in a second.
Yeah, I like that. So I forget, what day did you say works well this week? Maybe Tuesday?
Yeah, I think Tuesday should still work. Yeah, I think so. Let me double check my schedule and then I'll text you.